Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamhi, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
And greetings. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is Ellen Kamhi, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Herbally Yours brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. And we're going to bring our guest on in a moment, but first I'd like to say I'm very excited because here at WHPC we have Facebook Live, and you can watch us while you listen to us, which is brand new to me. I've been doing shows actually here at WHPC since 1990, and today is my debut on Facebook Live, so I'm excited, and thank you for joining us. Our guest today is Dr. Nicolette Perry, and Dr. Perry has a PhD in pharmacognosy from King's College in London, where she is miraculously joining us from London right here on WHPC, and she has researched and published on medicinal plants for the brain in particular, which will be our focus for today. Her research into sage for Alzheimer's disease triggered a move to research central nervous system plants at Newcastle University. Her long-term interest, beginning with a degree in biology for health, with a particular focus on aromatic plants for the brain. She is also the director of the Dilston Physic Garden, a nonprofit established for education of medicinal plants, and also teaches on the foundation of plant medicine. And here's her beautiful book that we'll be talking about today. It's called Your Brain on Plants, and amazingly enough, her co-author is her mother, another Dr. Perry, Dr. Elaine Perry. So what a great story we have for you today, and lots of wonderful information. So thank you for joining us today, Dr. Perry, on Herbally Yours.
Thanks, Ellen. It's great to be here.
And we love this book. I've had this now quite a while because we've been looking at it specifically to do the radio show. But what made you focus on how plants can help brain health?
Oh, yeah. It's a really interesting story, actually, because it actually goes back 400 or so years. Not with me alive, but it started when I was doing my degree, so my first degree, and Elaine, who is the co-author, was doing research.
Wait. And also, let's throw out, Elaine is your mother, besides being the co-author, right?
Everyone always likes bringing that one up. Yeah, yeah. So Elaine's my mother, and I guess she's my inspiration because I've been doing what she stimulated me to do for 20 years. So way back when I was doing my degree, when she was looking at plants, the potential of plants for the brain, because she was studying Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia and other things like autism, and was looking at what was available to treat them, and was a bit disillusioned by what was available with drugs because partly their lack of efficacy and partly because of their side effects. And she suddenly actually took inspiration from a conference on consciousness down in Mexico that actually I was on too, and she was inspired to look at old herbals, so herbals that were written, English herbals that had been written like 400 years ago, and what people used to do for their brain basically in the past, because we've obviously been around for a long time as human beings, and we've wanted to look after our brains for a long time. So what did people do before these drugs were available? So she looked up old herbals written by people like John Gerard and Culpeper, and discovered that some commonly used herbs were actually used to boost the brain and to help restore memory and to help attention and focus. And so she got really excited by that, and I did too, actually, because I was doing a degree in biology and health and disease, and was quite into plants, not really from their medicinal value, but from their botanical aspect, from botany. So I decided to look at what these common herbs like sage, like rosemary, like lemon balm, melissa could do in the lab. So we got hold of some brain tissue, and we mushed that up with some plants, and what came out was some really exciting results. And we found that compounds in and the whole plant itself of sage and rosemary actually boosts the brain signal called acetylcholine, so it stops its breakdown in the brain. So this was in lab tests, and eventually it kind of just grew from there, and I ended up spending 3 years studying Spanish sage, and what it can do for memory, and not just for memory, but also protecting the brain, so antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, estrogenic as well. So that's how it began. Yeah,
that is a great start, and I want to remind you, listeners, you can tune in to watch us on Facebook Live as well as right here on air on 90.3 WHPC. And today, our guest is the author of this book. If you're looking live, and otherwise I'll read it to you, it's Your Brain on Health. She is our guest today here on Herbally Yours, and her name is Dr. Nicolette Perry, and we're talking about your brain on plants. Dr. Perry, something that you shared was very inspirational to me, because you talked about well-known herbalists, for those of us in the herbal community. Maybe everyone didn't hear about them, but you can Google, right? You can Google now. Gerard and Culpepper. Now, the thing about them is they actually studied even more ancient traditional knowledge from indigenous healers, and let's say here in this country from our own Native Americans and First Nations people, and then they started writing them in books and also trying them with live individuals, and they said, you know what, it really works. But we didn't have the molecular clarification and an explanation of why and how it works, which someone like you is now discovering on both a cellular level as well as a mechanism of action level. And then as we move into clinical trials, we're seeing, you know what? The old folks knew what they were talking about. It does work, and now we know why.
Yeah, it's really crazy, isn't it? I mean, when you actually think about it, it's not crazy, because it's kind of basic that human beings will have wanted to look after themselves since we, first evolved, basically. First we could start eating plants, we'd have been trialing what was good for this. And so, just as you say, nations around the world have been using all of their local fauna, and sometimes possibly even other things, to look after their health, to help sleep, even help memory, to help keep them calm. So everybody around the world uses their different plant species, and they've been using them for thousands of years, 5,000 years and before. And there's evidence of that at Paleolithic sites, in dental plaque, in Bronze Age sites. For example, in the UK, meadowsweet being used for pain and fever. And actually, one I really love to talk about is willow bark in relation to this, because I find this really fascinating.
Well, wait, I just want to tell her, to just clarify, we're talking about a tree that all of you could recognize. Dr. Nicolette Perry, who's our guest here today, the author of Your Brain on Plants, is about to explain willow bark. You know what a willow tree looks like, a white willow. It has long leaves that flow around in the wind. Very common plant right here in our listening area. Please go ahead, Dr. Perry.
Yeah. We've got 100 willow coppice at the Physic Garden dedicated to this plant, because it's one of the most widely used drugs that is derived from it, aspirin. But a lot of people don't realise that they can get the same efficacy, the same pain relief efficacy, from using plants like willow bark. So this is Salix alba. So it's white willow. And what I find fascinating about it, talking about stories of and where you get your information from, is that Hippocrates being the father of medicine, and some medical schools still take the Hippocratic Oath, so he used to take his willow bark for pain. He used to take it in wine, but he used to add black pepper to it as well. And when I read that, when I first read that, I sort of, well, yeah, okay, so why was he doing that? But then you realise now, and science is showing that black pepper actually enhances the absorption of certain plant chemicals. So, for example, there's been a clinical trial testing the efficacy of turmeric and curcumin, and black pepper has been shown to increase the absorption of curcumin by 2,000%. So it really makes you wonder why black pepper is a spice, firstly. And, the fact that we've had it with food for many years, is that because we've been wanting to, without knowing it, we've been enhancing the absorption of these plants.
Now, when you talk about white willow bark, that's interesting too, because every plant has a different plant part that is used. So in terms of white willow, we don't just pull the leaves off the tree. We actually strip the bark. But it's so easy, because I do this all the time. You can just take a little knife, notch it under the first part of the bark, and strip it right off, put it in a cup, and add hot water. And something else that's very interesting is when we know that aspirin, of course, as a drug isolate, is taken very often. It's good. It can stop pain, but it also has a lot of side effects, such as puncturing holes in the gastrointestinal tract and cause gastric bleeding. And yet, when we use the full bark, not only does it have actives that might help with inflammation and pain, it also has actives put there by who? By God, by nature, whatever you believe in. Certainly not by myself or Dr. Perry. They're just there, that act as a demulcent or soothing agent, so you get much, much less of that perforation of the gastric tissues, or none, really, that's been reported.
Yeah, that's right. So salicin that converts to salicylic acid. So from willow bark actually converts in the duodenum, not the stomach. So you don't get the gastrointestinal side effects from willow bark that you do from aspirin. And of course that's interesting, because you wouldn't necessarily use willow bark for blood thin uses of aspirin, but also it highlights the fact that, and actually that more and more you see when you do take a plant medicinally. And I talk to many people who think, okay, well, I'm just going to start taking this plant, I'm going to launch straight in and take it. And actually I always want to say to them, well, actually, if you're treating a condition or you're on other medication, then please talk to a medical herbalist, because these are plant chemicals that are active, and they have effects in the body, but they also can affect liver enzymes, so they can affect other drugs that you're taking. So
I just want to shout out that if anyone would like to jump in and join myself, Ellen Kamhi, the natural nurse, and you're listening right here to Herbal Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC, and our guest today, Dr. Nicolette Perry, who is the author of this beautiful book, Your Brains on Health. We will take your call on air. Make it clean and mean, guys. And the call-in number is 516-572-7440. 516-572-7440. Because most people do have concerns about memory loss. Now, is memory loss... And when you talk about brain, and you threw out autism. Now, autism is a condition that often affects young people. It's not reserved for elderly people. While, sort of what they call dementia might affect older people more often. Is that what you have seen?
Yeah. So dementia. There are a few cases of early onset dementia, but dementia mostly affects people over the age of 60 to 70, and it's all to do with basically our cholinergic system in our brain, which is all about acetylcholine, and it's about a molecule that helps us attend, helps us focus, helps keep our attention, and helps us remember. So, it's linked with even consciousness itself. Acetylcholine is a little molecule that's really key to our attention, and it actually decreases naturally as we age. But in Alzheimer's, it actually decreases significantly, and the cholinergic system is impaired. So boosting this signal has been shown to help increase attention and help increase memory.
Well, thank you so much for that. But we're going to just take a break here to hear from a caller who has a question both for myself and for Dr. Nicolette Perry, author of Your Brain on Plants. So hello, Charlie from Roslyn Heights. How you doing?
Okay. How's everybody there?
Great.
Okay. I recently went to Europe for the first time, and I never really experienced jet lag like I got there. Is there anything for jet lag? I also have, I used to have leaky gut syndrome too, so I have to be careful what I take. Is there anything I could take for jet lag?
Well, there is something, but I wonder if we know of a plant that would be helpful for that.
Right. You've got me on the spot with that one, because I think there's certainly something you can take that will help you sleep when you want to sleep, and there's some kind of fast-acting plants like valerian and specifically a valerian hops combination. And actually, interestingly, I was just giving a talk the other day where I was telling people about plants for helping sleep and to help bring on the onset of sleep and increase the quality of sleep. And I was letting them smell different essential oils, and one in particular was hops. And after people smelt it, and they just had it on a little stick, about 10 minutes later, I have to say my audience got rather sleepy and quite woozy.
That's a great one. So I'll just throw out that there is a nutritional supplement that is not necessarily a plant, which is melatonin, that is very specific to help with jet lag. And there's quite a number of studies to where people have used it so they can get back on their circadian rhythm cycle, because that's what's interfered with when we do jet lag. And that is made by the pineal gland. But it's more of a hormone, not so much a plant compound. However, what Dr. Perry shared with us also, plants that can help the brain in terms of sedation for sleep include ones that she spoke about, such as hops and passion flower and other plants as well. Certainly valerian. Don't take valerian and then drive, because it really does put you out. But if you're having trouble sleeping, you may want to try it. So here on the Ask the Natural Nurse, you can call in if you'd like at 516-572-7440. Dr. Perry, I'm going to show a picture for those who are on Facebook Live of the plant that you wrote so much about, which is sage. And that is a perennial, usually. It comes back. If not, you can replant it. And it grows in our local radio listening area, as well as, of course, we're being listened to everywhere in the world. It's so amazing. So tell us more about sage, because you are an expert on sage.
Oh, yeah, I can definitely enjoy talking about sage. So there are many different species of sage, and the sage that I studied for 3 years was the Spanish sage, so and a European sage as well called Salvia officinalis. Now, officinalis denotes the fact that it was medicinal. So Salvia officinalis, so the common sage that... Is that the one that you have growing next to you?
We have various ones that are very similar, the same as what's showing up in your book. Sometimes they have a European sage like officinalis. That is it. Sometimes we have ones with a little purplish leaves, which I like because it reminds me of New Riders of the Purple Sage. That's why I have that one. But nonetheless, they have similar medicinal components, yes.
Oh, right, yes. Yeah, and so Salvia officinalis purpurea is the purple one we have here, and it's really beautiful, isn't it?
Yes.
So, so there's a Spanish sage as well, which is a thinner-leaved sage, and this is the one I studied, and it's called Salvia lavandulifolia. And actually, it's interesting because it looks a little bit more like lavender. It has thinner leaves, and also it contains more of a constituent that's in lavender. So in these sages, there's this compound that if you rub the leaves, and people will be familiar with that scent, you're smelling cineol, a little compound called cineol, and you're also smelling camphor. And these constituents, these aromatic little constituents, have been shown to reach the brain, so to get into the blood via inhalation or via massage, and reach the brain to boost this signal acetylcholine. So Sage has got some lovely quotes around it. So we've got a quote here: "He that would live for our eye must eat sage in May," and that is because, I mean, these guys wrote this, 200, 300 years ago, but in May time, when you would harvest the plant to use it medicinally, this little compound cineol is at its highest. So it's really interesting how they figured out, eat your sage in May, and that's when it's good for you. But actually, as you say, it grows all year, and it doesn't actually die back. So you can actually, grow your own sage and harvest it and use it. And now, the interesting thing about sage is it's kind of a bit of a European cure-all here. So it's not only good for the brain in terms of boosting memory and being used traditionally for that, but it is also an antioxidant, it's anti-inflammatory, it's antibacterial, antiviral, and so these different aspects of it, especially the antioxidant and anti-inflammatory aspects, are really good for the brain. So really good for protecting the brain, which is something that we want to do from about the age of 40. So eating your sage, getting as much as sage as you can, drinking tea, is a really good way to do that. Just taking
you're bringing up a good point, Dr. Perry, in terms of if people, first thing, they can always look in your book, which I'm holding up. Those of you who are on Facebook Live as well. It's Your Brain on Plants, and you have lots of recipes and suggestions about how to incorporate more of these medicinal herbs into your life. And I think even if people are on pharmaceuticals, in which case, like you said, it's a good idea to speak to someone who's knowledgeable about any possible herb-drug interactions. But when you use them as a flavoring agent or just in your food, I don't think that has too much of a concern.
Yeah, so when you're not reaching a medicinal level, so if you were taking sage tea, 3 times a day, that's fine. Taking sage tea at a medicinal level would be more like the equivalent of 2 tea bags 3 times a day. Then you're talking about more of a medicinal level, and that's when you'd be aware of contraindications with other drugs. But the preventative aspect of foodstuffs, food is our medicine, as Hippocrates said too, is really vital, and you're still getting all of these bioactives, these polyphenols, these little monoterpenes we were talking about, like cineol, into the blood. And just what we were talking about before for melatonin, things like sour cherry, even mushrooms are high in melatonin. So that chap, for jet lag, have a packet of sour cherries in your bag when you're on the plane. Have some mushrooms for breakfast.
Those are great suggestions, because if we look at where do these medicinal isolates occur in plants, we can often use them more intelligently. I'm actually on my way right after our show tonight to the American Herbalist Guild National Convention, where I am talking about infertility. But there are so many people who are involved in herbal medicine now. I really feel like it's exploding, and it's wonderful that people like yourself are taking the traditions and what we might even call the folkloric stories that have been passed down for generations. And let me tell you, I've never found one that's not true, because if it's not true, that story doesn't get passed down for generations. But you are verifying it with science, which is such a wonderful movement forward about making plant medicine more understood and more accessible.
Yeah, I think so. But I also think it's the story and the long use that actually give it clinical efficacy. I mean, you can't get a better clinical trial than 500 years of safe medicinal use that's recorded historically. So I think that is really interesting.
Yes, absolutely. And what about rosemary? How fascinating that those old traditional stories about rosemary is that it helps your memory. And now you are really finding out how and why that happens. In fact, there was a study, I believe it might have been two years ago in 2017 or so, that just rubbing rosemary leaves and smelling them can actually increase memory?
Yeah, well, you see, when I first got into plant medicine, I would have sort of read that statement or heard that and gone, yeah, right. But actually, now it makes complete sense, because people can take a medicine as a pill or a capsule of a herb, but actually what you're doing is you're ingesting that plant and you're getting it into your body and into your blood. So you can do that by taking a capsule, but you can also do it by eating the plant. But you can also do it by getting the aromatics into your blood, and you can those go straight in through your nasal cavity and into your blood. And actually, it's much faster. You're going to see a much faster effect on your memory. And you just need to think of peppermint and the stimulatory effects of these plants. To realise how quick and fast acting they can be when you inhale these little molecules. And these are tiny little molecules, what we were talking about. They really cross the blood-brain barrier, and they cross through our skin very, very quickly and easily. And they're oily too, which is...
Well, I want to thank you, because we're actually coming to the end of our time together, Dr. Perry. How can people find you and your wonderful book, Your Brain on Plants?
Thank you. So you can find out about us in Dilston Physic Garden at dilstonphysicgarden.com. So that's DILSTONPHYSIC and then garden.com.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being our guest. And thank you, listeners and viewers on Facebook Live, for tuning into Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamhi, at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us again next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.